Hey, it's Kelly here, host of the Girlfriend God podcast, which is brought to you in part thanks to the support of New World Women. New World Women, in case you haven't heard me talk about it before, is a global sisterhood of women who gather together to share, support, and uplift one another on their empowerment, healing, and spiritual journeys. This is the only cooperative organization that I know of that provides paths to prosperity and actually pays women to take care of themselves, to help others, and to learn new things. If you are ready for better and want to sign up today, or if you just want to learn more about New World Women and what we can do for you, please visit our bit.ly link at bit.ly/NWWGFG. Again, that's bit.ly/NWWGFG. Thank you. And now let's get to our episode. Welcome to the Girlfriend God podcast, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to follow it, rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. Now, together, let's find the divine. Okay. Welcome to the Girlfriend God. Today, I'm really happy to meet with Sara Aranel. How'd I do?
Wonderful.
Pretty good? Okay. Sara is an anthropologist by degree and by heart. She has been forever fascinated and inspired by the depths and complexity of human existence. She's been walking her spiritual path since her mid-teens and has always balanced her spiritual self with her curious, rational mind. As a teacher and an organizer of women's circles, we have a lot of those on the show. She experienced firsthand how important this balance is for people in a safe space where all aspects of our being are supported. People can relax as they feel safe. And in that state, they are able to start healing. For a little over a decade, she's been exploring the wisdom of the cycles of nature through the teachings of our ancient ancestral heritage. Turns out that they knew much about how to navigate our human life in different periods of a yearly cycle so that one doesn't burn out but builds a fulfilling life. And you can find and follow Sara on Instagram and Facebook, and those links are in the show notes. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. You were one of the first people that I always cast a wide net, and some people I never hear from, but you actually contacted me, which I want you to know is the first time that has happened. It's the first
Really?
time somebody reached out to me and said, I'd like to be a guest on your show. And then not long after that, someone else did. So hopefully that's a trend for the future and I don't have to work so hard.
I understand the frustration. And well, hopefully I opened the gate.
Right, right. I hope so too. I hope so too. Um, so one of the things that we had talked about previously was this whole, I think it's interesting that in your bio that you make a link between the cycles of nature and our ancient ancestral heritage. So I think first I want to ask you, say a little bit more about when we think of heritage, we think of, my heritage, my DNA, the searches that we do online with our own family, but you said our ancient heritage. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and what that distinction is?
Okay, wow. So this could in itself be a very wide topic. First of all, yeah, I really don't like to focus only on genetics and things like that because a lot of the heritage that we are very much defined by has nothing to do with genetics, but it has much to do with history, with culture, with just this environment that we grow up in, or from the people that surround us, even if we move a lot throughout life, we are very much defined by what's going on around us. So you might be, I don't know, somebody that is a child of somebody that moved from another part of the world. So your genetics are actually from that part of the world, but then
Right.
you're defined by the culture where you actually grow up in. Um, Actually, you are defined by both of them because we already know that a lot of the past experiences of our ancestors are actually even seen in our genetics. Now we
Right.
can see that like trauma, it actually becomes a part of your genetics, and then you just give it on to your children, let's say.
Right.
Um,
Right. A lot of that is encoded in our DNA, and I feel like not just trauma, all that cultural knowledge too, right? Like
yes.
a few seasons ago, I did a guided ancestral journey with a woman named Robin Watt, and what I experienced was a feeling I'd always had but couldn't name, and that was a feeling for a longing for a homeland, and it isn't here, right?
Yeah.
It's where you are in the world, right? Because I have that uh, on my mother's side, like we were talking about before the show. So that longing for a homeland, I also have an intense longing for returning to a hunter-gatherer society, and all of that is encoded, whether it's discoverable by science or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that is one view of this. And then another one is, like you said, maybe you have some memories that um, you can't really see where exactly they are coming from,
Right,
but they are so deeply ingrained in you that they actually navigate your path throughout life.
right,
And like, for instance, I've experienced it myself, and I also know a few people that went for regression into past lives, and they saw where exactly those memories are coming from.
right,
Now, if you will believe in reincarnation or not, that's, I think it's not even so important, because maybe those are also some really strong memories that you connected to on a subconscious level, and they might not be a part of your past lives, but they are somewhere in the, let's say, collective consciousness that you are, really deeply connected to, and that is important to you.
right,
So
right,
that's another level of this. Or for example, I'm also a trained doula. So it was really so fascinating for me when I realized that it's quite common that women, during the birth of their children, they get in touch with the experience that their mothers had during the birth of them. And it is so amazing, because we see that those really strong experiences are so deeply ingrained into our subconsciousness. Sometimes I guess it's really quite impossible to see where exactly they're coming from, but they are a part of our consciousness. And it is something that is coming from our ancestors. But then when I'm
right,
saying it's about our ancient ancestors, the thing is that our history is really complex and it's really long, and there have been stages of great shifts. And when we're talking about like ancestors for the last few hundred years, that's actually really quite recent history. But then if we go back like 10,000 years back into our history, we see that human beings lived a very different life back
right,
then. They had really different worldview and consciousness about, what sustainable life is and how to live in harmony with other people and with all other beings in the world. And I like to especially explore that history. I mean, I love history in general, but then
right.
that history, that part of the history that is showing us a completely different view of who human being is really deeply fascinating to me, because
Right.
we can see that there are actually findings that are showing that people lived for thousands of years in harmony and peace. And there are cultures that lived without any wars and fights for thousands of years back then. And I think that is very, I mean, it can change our view of who human being is completely. And that's
Right.
why I really like this part of the history. And that's why I like to stress out also that we can learn a lot from our ancient ancestors.
Right. I'll have
Yeah.
to I'll have to share with you so that Laura Hirsch that I mentioned, she did a six-part docu-series called Of the Goddess or From the Goddess. And the very first episode talks about ancient history. And one of the things that archaeologists have come to discover is prior to a certain time in history, because a lot of archaeologists, uh, a lot of their studies that have some sort of symbols of spirituality as their research focus, a lot of those are often burial mounds. And beyond a certain point, there were no weapons buried with people. So
Yeah.
they've been able to prove that, beyond this date, or at least this time period of several thousand years, there was no war,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I've talked about this on the show again and again and again with various people. The moment that we became divorced from living that way, we have been on this particular collision course ever since.
Yes.
When we forgot that we belong to the land, not the other way around. And in the industrial evolution of humankind, agriculture, of course, advanced our society, but agriculture also introduced ownership, greed, wealth. I mean, there is a time in human history where those words didn't exist. And I think
Well,
that's where we really started to get off course.
yeah. Well, of course, if you start controlling what's gonna grow in the land, and when you start controlling other beings, like also having animals at home, um, that's already hierarchy. It's like it's saying I'm more important than some other being in
Right.
this space. So I'm controlling what's going on, and that's already the system that we know today.
Right. Right.
And it was just in steps. So I guess us women, I believe that we feel this much deeper than men because we were on the losing side of this system for a very long time. So we physically know what it feels like to be dominated very harshly by somebody else.
Right.
And I guess that's also why this is sort of known also as kind of a women part of the history because it's also a lot of women that deal with these topics that want to dive into these topics. And one of them, probably one of the most known, is Maria Gimbutas.
Right.
I You probably heard about her.
Mhm.
She did the research in my part of the world, a bit
Right.
southern from me. So I'm from Slovenia, and she did the research in Croatia and then further down towards Greece. And she was talking about her findings very loudly. He did a lot.
Hello. Oh, our internet went down?
Oh,
Sorry, we lost internet there for a second.
yeah, I heard that recording stopped, but now it's back again, right?
Yes, it says my internet is unstable.
Okay.
Well, hopefully that won't be an issue.
Yeah, if it's gonna be an issue, we can just do
Well,
it again.
yeah, if it's a problem, we can always reschedule, but
Yes.
for now, I can
Yeah.
just edit that part out.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So
I
Maria
don't know where it
Gimbutas.
stopped and what you were saying.
Yeah. I was talking about Maria Gimbutas, that did the research in
Yes,
this part of the world. And she saw that there were societies that lived here for a very long time, like for thousands of years, some of them, and they were very highly evolved and had wonderful art and also technology and very strong connections to other parts of the world as
right,
well. But there's no evidence of any weapons and stuff like that. So
right,
um, it's showing us that, those messages that they keep on giving us, that human is the worst of the beings in the world, that all we can do when we meet each other is just kill each other. That
right,
is so untrue, because there were civilizations that lived for a much longer time than our current civilization, and they lived in peace and they
right,
prospered. And it's like, so that message is completely false. And if we keep on repeating the message, and if we send our children to schools and they learn about only the dark part of the history,
right,
the violent part of the history, then we create this state of mind. And then, of course, we're going to repeat this way of living. And I think
right,
that is really important to talk about these topics now, when we know that the findings show different
right.
picture of who we can be and how we can live. And we can create a different future from the recent history that we are living at the moment.
So one of the episodes in that From the Goddess series is essentially an hour-long self-contained little mini documentary about Gimbutas.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she was one
Uh,
of the first, and she was really quite famous, and
right,
she had a huge influence on especially spiritual, let's say, people of her time.
right,
Yeah,
right. And
so I can
and
imagine.
and as a ancient history researcher myself, I've read a lot of her work. So yes, very, very familiar. I think that she would be pleased that she still has such an influence today, not only on academics, but on anybody who's somehow involved in goddess worship or goddess spirituality. Um, and there are a lot of us, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this influence of energies in the cycles of the seasons. And one of the things I'm particularly interested to know is, on this show, we talk a lot about gender and about how now is the return of the goddess, that it is time for that in our human history. And I have often said, intellectually, I understand that God, goddess is neither male or female. But I think given where we are as a society, that creator needs to be gendered to accomplish what we need to accomplish as humanity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine where exactly you're coming from. I would just say that I never really related myself to any, let's say, God as it is. To me, it's more like an energy, a force, a consciousness, something like that,
Right,
quite undefined. And I'm really very open to however people want to, um, I don't know, interpret it or just name it, let's say, as
right,
long as we can live in harmony with that, as long as we are not enforcing this view upon somebody else. But I would say that, yeah, with these religions that are very male dominated,
hmm,
um, I think it automatically leads into disharmony, because you
right,
can, if you only voice one part and completely dismiss the other one, then obviously we had disharmony.
Right. I've often said, the patriarchy can really only claim the last 6 to 8,000 years, but
Yeah,
goddess worship goes back 30,000 years. So,
exactly.
so,
Exactly.
so do you think that that's part of the cyclical nature? Because we don't know how many times we've done this before. Maybe we've always been, maybe the earth has always spun in a balance of a period of male-dominated spirituality followed by a period of female dominated spirituality. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
For all we know, we're version, 2.8765 human. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We don't really
pretty
know what
much.
has come before.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that we're in a cycle of, okay, we're going to have 30,000 years of goddess worship, and then we're going to flip that for 30,000 years, but then we're going to go back to that. You know what I mean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, as you said, I definitely agree that we have absolutely no idea about life. Like it's just too, it's too great, it's too vast, it's too everything. And we cannot grasp the wideness and the undefinedness of life. It's
Right,
impossible because it's so much bigger than we are as human beings, but still we are a part of it. So we can still like float with it. Like, we can
right,
still be led by it. We can still be the creators of it. Um, but otherwise, um, I mean, I guess we could say that we've already went through few cycles because we do have records of that, like from Mayan culture and also from any ancient culture, actually.
right,
They all repeat that, we had the great floods and stuff like that. And those were like the endings of one cycle and then it led to another one.
right.
Some people would say that uh, like cultures, well, like what's it called, Atlantis,
Mhm.
that was ended by a very male dominated consciousness and that's why it was ruined. But we don't know, I guess. At least at the moment we don't really have any concrete records of that, so we can't really say for sure this is how it was.
Right,
But I would say that if everything else is in cycles, and if we can see so many records of really written data when exactly one cycle is starting and the other one is ending, then I guess we can think that probably there is something about it, that there is something to it.
right,
But to me personally, um, I mean, we can speculate with all this, and I think it's really interesting. But on the individual level, I would say that what's really important is to distinguish between, so I have all this knowledge about this topic, and I know what are the supportive practices and what practices will lead us into destruction and something that is not really pleasant to experience. So if you have this knowledge, pick the supportive practices. That's it. I mean, even if you're in a male dominated system, you can still do good. You can still
right,
at least voice the other opinion. You can do the practices that will, you know, at least partially bring the other side into the equation as well.
right,
And I guess it's just not it's not something that gives you the right to do um, the unsupportive practices just because you're in a system that is not that supportive.
right,
Yeah,
right. Well, I mean, practitioners of goddess religions and goddess worship now are doing just that, right? We don't live in a system that supports that, but we're doing it anyway.
exactly.
So, um,
Exactly.
And you were saying, I mean, it's so huge and it's so vast. And if you look at, well, first, I mean, geologists have tried to break things into periods, right? With the Pleistocene and the Holocene and all of that. So we've got some rough idea of what was happening with the Earth, at least. Um, and they know about the ice caps, and I don't know. This is not a subject I'm particularly knowledgeable about. But, if you look beyond even the human history, I mean, the universe is what, I never know my number. It's like 500 billion years old or something like that.
Yeah.
I
But who
mean,
can really
we're
know?
we're early to the party. You know what I mean? And we have
Yeah,
only been here a short amount of time
yeah,
in regards to everything that happened before. And it's interesting to me that as the universe has continued to expand, contract and expand, contract and expand, contract and expand, things have gotten more complex with each step, right? Like first there was the atom, and then there was a particle, and a particle was more complex than an atom. And then there was a cell, and a cell is more complex than a particle. Like all of that complexity building and building and building before we were even here.
yeah. I mean, I think we don't really exactly even know how much truth there is to this history that we kind of are supposed to know.
Right.
Because yeah, yeah, honestly, when you really dive into history, especially the ancient history, you see that nobody really has the idea of what was going on.
Nobody knows.
Because there are so many findings that are completely demolishing everything that we were taught.
Right.
Absolutely no idea how certain things were done, how, what kind of technology is behind that.
Right.
And to be honest, the historians that are working on these topics, they usually are not even supposed to be published.
Right. Right.
You're not supposed to openly talk about that.
Right. Right.
So we actually have no idea of our history, especially if you go more than 2000 years back from
Right.
now.
Right.
So I'm so open to different interpretations of what was going on because I've seen how many times just by new findings things were completely switched around.
Right. Okay. So you were saying
Yeah, I was saying that we actually have pretty much no idea of our history. And
beyond the
I think
past
that,
couple thousand years, if that, right?
yeah, and I mean, actually, as I was going through the topics that we actually learned in school, also of, I don't know, like things, very, very well-known things like French Revolution, for instance.
Right.
And then you get different views of this topic. You see that the things were so different than we were taught in school, and they were so much more complex, and they they just happened on so much different and deeper levels than we were taught. And then you're like, okay, so this completely changes the picture and the worldview again. And I think that, yeah, we learn about very adjusted history
Hmm.
that is very, um, let's say, it's very useful to get this interpretation of the history if you want to maintain the system that we currently have in the world.
Right.
Yeah, again, as we were saying about it before. And for instance, here in my part of the world, in Bosnia, they discovered the biggest pyramids in the world. And they've known about them for, I think, at least 15 years now. And a lot of research has been done on it on all levels, like really completely physical and excavations and with energies and with everything
Hmm.
from the top researchers. And nobody's supposed to officially talk about it.
Hmm.
And the
Well,
the very well,
you destroy the tourism industry in Egypt.
yeah, but not just that, it also destroys the the worldview of what was possible 40,000 years ago,
Right,
because that's how old they are. And the technology, which is beyond everything that we know at the moment, because they are still generators of energy, which pyramids are. Just the structure of a pyramid is like enhancement of energy of and creator of energetic fields. So it's like we have absolutely no idea. And I'm not saying that, we should um, just go into extremes with the ideas of what's possible and what's not possible. I'm
right,
just saying that we should maintain this position of being very humble in what we know and what we don't know. And if we are very true to ourselves, with most questions about life, we don't have the concrete answers. And
right,
all we can do is re-question and explore, constantly explore. And I think that is actually a very creative position to be in and very open to different just findings about yourself and life in general. And I
right.
think we need to get in touch with that part of ourselves, which is really very also very vulnerable position because we've always been taught that you need to have the answers.
Right,
You get the test and you need to know the answers. But
right,
most of the time we have no idea. And all
right.
we can do is just, I don't know, I'm open. Let's see.
My one of my favorite expressions is, "What the fuck do I know?" Really? I
Exactly.
mean, really?
Exactly.
What do I
And the
know?
more
I
that
know where
I
I live. I know my own personal history. I know maybe a little about you, but that's kind of it.
Yeah. And most of the time, we don't even know about ourselves
Right.
because there's so much more to explore about ourselves as well. And then when you dive deeper into, let's say, I also study psychotherapy. So I'm deeply in this personal process as well. And then when you dive deep into your trauma and into your personal, like physical family lineage. And then when you take into consideration also what happened to your parents, then you're like, oh my God, the depths of myself that I can still explore. It's
Right.
amazing. And yeah, as I said, it's also a very creative position to be in because you can constantly get to know more about yourself and life and be constantly, surprised and in awe. Like, oh my God, I had no idea about this. This is so amazing.
Hmm. That's why I
Yeah.
read a lot of nonfiction because I find things that I don't know anything about fascinating.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, it is so fascinating.
So so let's get into the energies of the season. Let's just start there. The energies of this. Well, first, so in your view, based on what you know, it roughly follows that pagan calendar of sabbats and major and minor holidays, and that the year is divided not into four sections but eight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I kind of dove deeper into this, let's say, culture or cultural lineage of Celts because they also lived in my part of the world. So they followed the same seasons and they actually also lived in, like really also my town. Yeah. Part of them actually came down to my town as well.
Mhm.
So I'm in Central Europe. So this is very much, what's going on in this geographical landscape and also the seasons and everything. So that's why I kind of dove deeper into their heritage. But as I said before, I'm very much interested in all other as well. So
Mhm.
it's not just about these. And also, yeah, as you mentioned, the 8 parts of the year, um, we can actually name them now with these Sabbats. I'm not really into you have to know the names. I'm just saying, so if we don't have any other better expression about this, let's just use the names that we already know,
Right.
because it's, to me, it's harmless. I don't
Right, right,
really care where exactly the names are coming from. What I care about is what they're teaching us,
right.
what wisdom they can, pass on to us, and how we can explore ourselves and the nature around us and these dynamics between both, through the heritage that we have. It's there, we can take it, it's offered to us, so why not using it?
So is there an individual energy associated? Are there eight distinct energies associated with eight distinct periods of the cycle?
Yeah, so every period has, yeah, let's say distinct energies. Let's say it's not just, um, okay, so this is one energy and this is exactly what it's named and how it works. It's just what's going on and what approximately it's teaching us. So now we're approaching Samhain here in my part of the world. Again, if we went down to Australia, for instance, it would be just
Right,
the
it's the
opposite.
opposite.
Yes. And I would love to learn more also from the parts of the world that don't have 4 seasons as we have, or
Mhm.
8. Yeah, so I guess there is also a certain cyclical happening in those parts of the world as well.
Right.
But what I can talk about is what I'm experiencing here.
Okay.
So now we're approaching Samhain. To me, actually, it's already started because the energies are completely Samhain already.
Right.
So it's closing on the inside, it's slowing down. It's not complete stillness as in Yule, but it's slowing down. It's letting go of things which we can also see everywhere around us. The leaves are falling, everything is going into, you know, it's just stopping, slowly, just, yeah, slowing down. And then, because we need to let go of things in this part of the year, we can also get in touch with the topics like grief and sadness, because we feel much more of these emotions in this part of the year that is, quite gloomy. We don't have so much sun anymore. But on the other hand, there's also so much beauty in it. Like when you see the autumn leaves, they're so beautiful, even when they are letting go.
Right.
And if we dive deep, really deep into grief and sadness, at least my experience is such that we can get in touch with so much beauty and peace that is very deep in our being. And if we are not willing to slow down, we cannot reach that part of our being. So that, it is connected to the, let's say, general energy of slowing down, but then you have so many subtopics that are connected to this.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
I agree with you that I mean, there is a kind of beauty in grief, and there is a kind of beauty in death, especially when you're aware of the cycle, you know that death is always going to be followed by rebirth.
Yeah.
Always.
There is no
Every time.
rebirth without
Right.
without. And I mean, we often talk about this like, oh yes, of course, there is no rebirth without death. But, well, to be honest, death is still very painful,
Hmm.
even if you have this awareness, and it's still hard to get in touch with it. So I guess it's really quite amazing that nature is giving us this whole part of the yearly cycle every year to get in touch with small parts of death and of letting go. Because to experience it all at once can be really quite devastating sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, so, but it's not just death as in physical death. I mean, grief can be connected to so many different aspects of our life. We can grieve the childhood that we never had. We can grieve the parents that we never had, or the quality of the parents that we never had. We can grieve our dreams and aspirations. There are so many things that we are holding in, and I mean, it's real. It's very real, and it is. It's also, you know, it it's something that influences our lives on such a deep level that if we really don't get in touch with that, it becomes a part of the subconsciousness that can also navigate your life into negative directions, because
Right.
it is a heaviness that can also bury you underneath it. But if you realize what's going on, and if you get in touch with it, and if you're willing to dive very deep into it, my experience was that that place was so beautiful. It was so rich. It was the stillness that I didn't experience in any other part of my life.
Hmm.
And it was just this place of, even if this grief will never go away, which probably won't go away, I am so much richer because of it.
Right.
There's so much that I can feel because of it, and it expanded my capacity of just, feeling and experiencing life. That is, I would just, I wouldn't want to let go of it. I want, I want it to be a part of my experience and of my being and of my complexity.
Right. So it's been said that, and I can't remember who said it, which irritates me because I like to, I like to attribute things to their authors or who said famous quotes, but I'll have to look it up later. But it's been said that pain is the touchstone of all spiritual growth. And that has certainly been true in my experience and many of the people that I associate with. So yes, I think that's why we don't ignore the pain. We got to go down there. We got to look at it, right? We got to look because the
Yeah,
only way out is through.
yeah. If you cut off one part, then you cut off all parts,
Right,
because one cannot exist without the other one, because heart, or our emotional capacity, is a whole,
right,
and all parts of it are connected among themselves. So if we want to tear up just one part of them, the whole, it just it it disappears, it
right,
evaporates, and so you don't have it, and then you cannot experience any parts of it anymore. Or let's say, maybe it's easier to understand, if you shut one part of your heart, it's shut. There's no gate open anymore.
right,
So I mean, I wouldn't say that um, the only way to the spiritual growth is through pain. I would say that it is one of the important ways.
right,
And if we're not willing to walk this path, we won't be able to walk any other path as well. Other paths are possible because, let's say, in my experience as well, also the intense joy, or the intense state of awe and wonder, and all those paths, they are valid and they are very strong, and they can open us to so much wisdom and experience and growth, but we can only experience it if we are willing to experience all of them.
right. So what is the difference moving forward through that cycle? What is the difference between the energy of the winter solstice versus the energy of, I mean, I think of it as, so the winter solstice is one 24-hour event, but Yule
Okay.
is a whole season, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what's the difference between of the energy that moves between those two things? Or
Yeah.
or is it different?
Um, if you ask me at this moment, I would say that, well, maybe at one point I'll say things differently because I constantly find out new shades of this complex story. But at the moment, my view of these things is that I prefer talking about periods than just one date because then when you're only into celebrating one date, which is or the solstice or 1st of February or whatever date you take, then you focus all your energy only on that celebratory part usually. And then it gets all, holidayish and exciting, which is, it's good. We need that in life as well. But then, if we really want to soak in the wisdom of the part of the year that is giving us so many, all the days of opportunities of evolving and learning and growing, then we need to take the periods because we need time for that.
Right.
Lessons don't happen just overnight. And what I really like about the cyclical wisdom is that it's not about missed opportunities. It's like, no, now you have the opportunity, take as much as you can, but then if you can't consume it at the moment, there will be next time when you can experience it again, and it's no hard feeling, and you know the world is not ending.
Right.
It's something that we can relearn and, I don't know, also dive deeper and deeper and deeper each time in every cycle. So to me, I mean, I like the celebratory part, which is, oh, it's this date and we have so much opportunity to do the fun stuff and, light the candles and do the rituals and everything. But then also, for instance, we live in a time when you probably won't get a free day on winter solstice just because you're celebrating it.
Hmm.
And it might happen that you will be very busy on that particular day.
Right.
So just celebrate it some other time.
Right.
I mean, nature won't mind. Nature is very happy if you care about it and you do
Right.
it whenever you want, whenever is the best and the most authentic to you, and also in the way that is best and most authentic to you. So yeah, I prefer periods, but the dates are fun.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. So I feel like in the fall is, as you said, kind of a time of like taking stock and feeling all the feels, as it were. But then as we move further into the winter and the days get shorter and there's a lot more darkness, I find that is a time that I usually do a lot of journaling as a
Mhm.
way to, and a lot of prayer and meditation. I mean, I do a lot of prayer and meditation anyway, but kind of ramps up at that time of year. And gathering, it's like an information gathering process for me in preparation of what comes next, which is for me has always been, our New Year's Eve ritual for a long time has been a ritual of these are the things I'm letting go of, and these are the things I would like to carry forth into the new year. Plus my hopes and aspirations for the new year. Like that's what that process towards the end of the year looks like for me and has for a really long time. And I never feel like I'm bucking the current, right? Like I feel like I'm in that natural flow of energy. Like as I write, we have a big picture window. See if I can, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to flip my camera. Otherwise it would show you. Um, so anyway, the point is I have a full view of what's happening outside the window, because with this big picture window. So I can sit here and journal and look up and see the dying leaves, the dying limbs, the squirrels gathering their, to put things away for the winter. And because I feed all the animals, right? I feed the crows, I feed the squirrels, I feed the birds. I reluctantly feed the possums because I don't like them, but I'll feed them anyway because they're part of the cycle of nature, right?
And they're cute.
But I find it useful to incorporate that vision because I'm a very visual person into my reflective journey, right? Like I will sit right here where I'm sitting talking to you with this giant picture window in front of me. And that's where I'll journal in the winter. It's very,
Yeah.
it's very helpful to me.
Yeah, and I think that is so beautiful, that you have your own authentic practice, because so often, because we've been taught that there's an authority that is telling you how exactly you're supposed to do certain things and you need to do it properly, that we go, we end the schooling years, but then we take this way of working, this practice and this view of how things are supposed to be handled into the rest of the life.
Right,
But life never works that way. Life is there for you to experience it in your own authentic way. And so whenever I talk about these things with people, and whenever I work with people, uh, if I work with women or children, doesn't matter, I try to encourage them, you know, first of all, yeah, you can gather information so that you understand what's going on. That's fine. You can gather the inspiration from other people because, I mean, inspiration is always quite lovely to have, but then only pick the things that actually touch your heart and that are authentic to you,
right,
that you feel deeply, because that's when you build the energetic, base of your practice. If
right,
you don't have this energetic base, then it's pretty much worth nothing. It will not support you. It will probably deplete you because you will just try to recreate something that somebody else told you or showed you, and then in the end you'll probably be disappointed because it just won't function for you
right,
if it's not something that you actually feel on the inside as, okay, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is what I feel. So I mean, it's so important to switch this look that we constantly have on the outside on the inside,
right,
and just observe what's going on with you. Like when you're sitting in front of this window that you have and you see what's going on, just feel what you feel. Is it something that is telling you, oh, now is the time for you to go for a walk? And then you're like, oh, but that is really the best way for me to experience my body, my spirit, and these dynamics between outside and inside world. Or is it telling you, it's really quite chilly outside and you've been working so much lately. You really need to take it easy and just sit on your sofa, get a cup of tea, and just, you know, feel this coziness of
right,
this season. Both is valid.
right,
Both is something that can support you, but it can only support you if it's true to yourself.
right,
So it's always really important to be observant of what's going on inside of you and what's your personal expression, because somebody really needs, if you talk to an extrovert, they will constantly need to be in touch with people because that's how they refill their batteries.
right.
But if you talk to an introvert, of course, the best thing to do under the sun is just stay in, see the leaves that are falling, and drink that cup of tea. And both is okay.
Right, right. So moving into out of the winter into the spring, what are the energies that you would ascribe to this next time period? I mean, it's one thing to say Well, of course, it's about new life and rebirth, but I'm hoping that you can get a little more, take us into a little bit more of the specifics of the energy that we cannot resist, but rather be swept away by and flow with that natural cycle.
Yeah, so to me, there's this really beautiful connection between Yule and Imbolc. That is, so Yule is the winter solstice, and Imbolc is the 1st of February. Because so in my tradition, that is still kind of alive here in Slovenia. There's the saying that after Christmas, there are 12 days of, it's called like wolf nights. Um, so that is the part of the year when the wolves are running around and howling, and we have this being from the old stories that is called Yaga Baba. And those are like really the horrible women, that can harm you and stuff like that. Yeah. So they are running across the land in this time of the year, during those 12 wolf days, well, 12 wolf nights.
Are they running
So
with the wolves?
probably, I would imagine.
That's how I imagined it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so the thing is that it's really quite logical. It's not like, oh, that's so much fun, the things that they imagined in the old days. No, it's logical because it's the deepest night. So the land is bare and it's cold and everything is frozen. And it is quite dangerous for a human being to walk around the night in that part of the year.
Right.
So the best thing to do is to go inside and rest. But the thing is that, so the ancient ancestors, they believed that on the winter solstice, the young god is born. So in Slovenia, in my language, we call Christmas Božić, which comes from the name of Bog, and the small Bog god is called Bogec or Božić. So it's actually the small god, because the god was supposed to go, so during these dark nights, it went in the underworld, and then in the underworld, in the dark part, in the darkness of the underworld, it was born, and then it got out, and then rebirthed the land, and so the land was rebirthed again. So the thing is that we have this birth in the darkest part of the night. And then we have this period of the 12 wolf nights. And if I connected that to my knowledge of birth, of human birth, because as I said, I'm a licensed doula, well, mostly postpartum doula. And the thing is that after birth, a mother is supposed to take a rest for 40 days. We actually have the saying that for 40 days and after the birth, there's death living under the mother's bed, because it was really dangerous for a mother to just, get out into the world and do whatever she wanted to do. She actually needed to stay in bed, and the community needed to take care of her. So if we have this young God being birthed in that stillness of the night, we are supposed to create this sacred, because the place where a new life is born is supposed to be sacred, it's supposed to be still, it's supposed to be safe. So we need to create this feeling of safety and sacredness in the darkest of the night. And then when I was going through, this heritage, I saw that they actually celebrated mothers on Imbolc. It was the Mother's Day. And it made so much sense. Of course, this is the time of the year when it's about rebirth. So first the God is being born, and then we have this really first sense of you know, not really rebirth like Stara time when you actually see the leaves already,
Right.
but the time before that, the potential of rebirth. So Imbolc to me, it's the time of potential that is still hidden underground, but we need to take care of it. We need to still be still. We need to really be patient with ourselves so that the potentials will be able to come out of the underground and then sprout into new life. And when I was going through this thought process, so why are mothers celebrated on Imbolc? Well, probably because if we went to Beltane, which is the celebration of sensuality and sexuality and beauty and pleasure and all that, that's when they had rituals of also sexual, intercourse,
Mhm.
when they actually did the sexual intercourse, which creates life, obviously. And
Right.
then if you count the time of the gestation, you come to Imbolc, which makes so much sense.
It really
So you
does.
have this, yeah, you have this complete cycle. And then, of course, that, you would want to birth a child in this time if you didn't have markets and stuff like that, like we have today, because for at least 6 months, well, for 6 months after birth, a child, it's the best for the child if they are fully breastfed, that you don't give them any other food because the organs are not completely formed in a way so that they could process the food still in the first 6 months. So if you count 6 months from Imbolc, you get to the point when the crops are already quite ready for the young child to also take the solid food in. So it's so beautiful. It's, when you see the logic and the wisdom behind it, it's like, oh my God, this is so beautiful.
Hmm.
So it's like slow phases, First the God is born in the darkness, and we need to make this space of darkness really safe and sacred. So to me, it's also about the inner sacred temple that you get in touch with in the darkest nights. And then you slowly get into the potentials of life, but you really need to cherish it. You need to support it, that it will be able to get, to really give birth to it. And then on you go to Ostara when you see, that land is already turning green and there's not that much of stillness anymore. But what I also noticed in the time between you and Imbolc, so somewhere in the second part of January, when the land was still completely frozen, I went ice skating outside on a pond here near my town. And I just stood still on the pond, on a frozen lake. And I just listened and felt the atmosphere around me. And I felt that the trees were already waking up a little bit. So it was far from them getting green, but you could feel that, just the juices were starting to move inside the trees. It was so beautiful, but it was in the most frozen part of the year. So it's
That makes sense, right? That there's a preparation period. Plus, standing where you were standing is the balance of that, and there's still life underneath you, beneath the ice,
mhm,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So what about, okay, so well, let me clarify something. So what does that season look like for somebody like me who doesn't have any children?
I didn't hear you. You don't have what?
If you didn't have, if you weren't impregnated at Beltane and didn't have a
Uh-huh.
baby and on
We are
February
constantly
1st,
birthing something.
right.
I mean,
And that's why I always look at my creative endeavors as like those are my children. They
yes.
that I
I
create.
never in I never intend to become a mom, but it's still the same intelligence of life
Right,
behind.
right.
It really depends on what you want to give birth to in life, and it doesn't really need to be like some grand projects or something.
Right.
It can just be another year of your life.
You could just give birth to ideas.
Exactly, exactly. You can give birth to a new you. Like, for instance, well, for women, we can experience like tiny particle of that, let's say, bigger picture every month with menstruation. If you really go deep into your bleeding period, so the menstrual cycle is the whole cycle, from bleeding to bleeding, obviously. But then the bleeding part is the winter part of the menstrual cycle for a woman. So if you really take time and dive deep into that part of the cycle, you can experience a small death inside of you and experience the rebirth. Like, in few of my cycles, I could physically feel that I was a different me after this hibernation. And I say that I go deep into my cave during those days. And then when I get out of that cave, I'm a different me. Sometimes I could actually, I needed to remember what was me before that.
Right.
So it can also be in this yearly cycle. If you really go deep into your sacred inner sanctuary during Yule, and then you take time to take care of yourself as a birthing mom, to your life projects or another life,
Hmm.
a year of your life, really, it's up to you what you want to pay attention to.
Right.
Then you can slowly build this energetic underlaying of the new part of the year,
Right.
because then in Ostara, we have this balance again because it's the equinox. So in Ostara, you will be at the point when you're going from the dark part of the year to the light part of the year. And you will need this very strong energetic foundation, and it doesn't happen overnight. So you need this slow building up. So in Samhain, slow down, let go of what you don't need anymore. In Yule, go into the darkest part of yourself and hibernate. Then see what your potentials are, or what are the potentials that life is telling you to use in this phase of your life. And then in Ostara, build the plan of how you will be creating them in the light part of the year.
So the final move between spring into summer and the heat of the summer, what energies are associated with that?
Okay, so then comes Beltane, which we mentioned before. Um, and then after Beltane, you have Litha, which is the summer solstice. And I really like to observe how just these dynamics across the circle. So on the one part you have Yule, and on the other part you have Litha. So as I said, Yule is about the inner sanctuary, the inner sacred space. But then in Litha, it's about the outer. I call it like my places of power. So world is calling you, go outside, disperse yourself, disperse your focus. It's not the time of focus of, so I'm building my really complex project and I really need to focus myself. No, it's about disperse yourself outside, because it's the time of greatest light, and the world is there to have you, to teach you something. And if you rebirth yourself on the inside in your time, you re-question and sort of also rebirth yourself on the outside. Let's say because of the outside influences in the time of Litha. Do you understand what
Yeah,
I'm?
yeah, I do.
Am I making sense?
Mhm.
On one side of the circle, it's about the inner story, and on the other side of the circle, it's about the outer story. So it's because I think that we also need to see that it's completely valid to constantly reshape and recreate yourself from this very intimate touch with your inner world. But then it's just as valid to also reshape yourself um, under the influence of the outside information, because that is also a very strong power that is giving you something to work with. Because if you only know your own little garden, then you don't know how much wisdom there is outside in the world that it has so much to teach you,
Right.
and it can enrich you in so many other ways. So both need to be happening all the time. And I think that in this dual world, you constantly have these two forces, one coming from the outside, one coming from the inside. And it's
Mhm.
always this dance between. So it's really lovely when you get this balance of both. So yeah, Litha is all about, outside. It's about dispersing. It's about sometimes even floating a little bit somewhere undefined. It's like um, evaporated moisture from the land. So you have this really strong sun up in the sky, and it's just evaporating everything out of the land. So
Right.
it's quite ungrounded. And then the next phase, um, so it's Lunasa. Lunasa grounds the energies again. So to me, it was so fascinating because for years I felt, here in Slovenia, we know that Italians, which are our neighbors, they start coming to our seaside in the beginning of August. It's Ferragosto. So it's like the peak season for seaside and for vacations here. But to me, August was always like, I don't need that anymore.
Uh-huh.
July to me was the time for vacations. Now
Right.
I need to focus again. It was so strange because everyone was giving me a different information. It was like, no, now we're going for vacation. And I was like, no, but the energies are telling me something else. And then I realized when I started researching these things that Lunasa is about harvest, it's about coming home, it's about community, it's about grounding yourself again. And yeah, if you just pay attention to it, your whole body is telling you,
Right.
even if everyone is doing differently, the energies are landing now. We need to get grounded again and focus our energy, and all the information that we gathered from the world, and now do something about it and use it for the good of community, because
Right.
Lunasa is very much about community. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, now we're back to autumn. We
Yeah,
haven't
I
mentioned.
feel I use the expression in the flow a lot. Like I know when
Mhm.
I'm in the flow, not
Yeah,
just of the natural rhythms, but the flow of my own life, the flow of my community, the flow of what's happening in the world, it just my financial flow, just all of it. I'm in the flow, I'm in the flow, and I know when I'm not in the flow.
yeah.
And then I
I
got to
think
figure out
body
what,
can tell you, and just, something on the inside is like, no, something is just not in harmony. So
yeah,
yeah, I think if we pay attention, we can feel it when it happens.
yes, yes,
Yeah. And flow is definitely a good place to be.
right. Okay. So we've reached our conclusion. We've traveled through the whole cyclical year, and we've talked about a lot of other things as well, as is the nature of this show. So, since you're familiar with the show, you know that at the end, I always ask guests the same three questions. Tell me something about yourself that people who know you would be surprised to learn.
It's so hard to find those things with me because I'm quite talkative. So people know quite a lot of things about me. I always have problem with questions like that. I'm always like, I have no idea what to tell you that you don't know yet about me.
Okay.
So to me, it's like, I'm very much, let's say, what you see is what you get, but not in a bad way, like shallow. But I really don't know how to hide things.
Hmm.
I'm a terrible liar, terrible. Even if I try, I fail completely.
Well,
So to me, it's like,
some of the things
yeah,
that guests have said in the past were just a particular event or something they'd done that people wouldn't have guessed. Like Kendall Elizabeth Parker, who was in the first and second seasons, that she chopped down a tree once. Would not have known that about her. You know what I mean? And like
I
mine is
know.
always, I like to take black and white photographs in very old cemeteries. Not something you might be surprised to learn.
Yeah, but the thing is that people know these things about me. If I like to take photos of cemetery, that would probably be the first thing that they knew.
Okay. You just
Because
get
I'd be like,
question.
that's fun.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun. To me, okay, let's say one thing that people are usually quite surprised about, which I'm surprised why they are surprised about, is that even though I really like spending time in nature and, outside of town and stuff, um, I really like having a cup of coffee in a cafe in the center of a town. I really don't know why that is so surprising to people, because
Mhm.
to me, it's like, why wouldn't I be, just loving both? But to me, the thing is that I spend a lot of free time in our capital during my high school years because we had such crazy schedule that sometimes we would have a few hours that when we would be free. So to me, it was just the amount of time when I could take a bus and get home and then just turn around and get back. So I spent that time in cafes, and that was just me time. And I really loved that, and I still love it. To me, it's like it's the time when I disconnect and nobody bothers me. And it's like now I'm just enjoying this coffee and observing world, and I love it. Yeah, and I have no idea why people are so surprised by that.
I don't find it that surprising. Although people probably just imagine you, in the lotus position in a field somewhere.
Yeah, but I can do both.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, Second question, what is your current favorite TV series? And if you don't watch TV, what you're reading right now? I came up with an alternate to that question because not everybody watches TV.
Yeah, I don't watch much TV, I have to
Okay.
say. Yeah, I don't know. I just find it not so interesting. I really love listening to podcasts.
Okay.
That's my go-to thing,
So
especially when
what's your current favorite podcast?
yeah, I really love Betwixt the Sheets. It's from a
Okay.
historian that is dealing mostly with, let's say, sex history, but also like kind of alternative and stuff like that. But she is a proper historian. But yeah, her episodes are really interesting and really fun, and I love history. So I like also people that open the topics that tend to be also sometimes quite uncomfortable for people,
Mhm.
let's
Mhm.
say. Yeah. Um, yeah, and a lot of feminine history there as well. But what I'm reading, many things at a time.
Me too.
Usually I have a few books that are open. So I actually lately read quite a few novels, which I didn't in the past, but right now my time is so packed with so many intense things that sometimes I just need to, just recharge with something really easy to read.
Hmm. Hmm.
But otherwise, I have a few witchy things, I have a few historical things, and I have a few, let's say, psychotherapy slash scientific things. Yeah.
So what light fiction are you reading right now?
I just finished, huh? I'm not sure what's it called in English. Otherwise, it's like Cafe in Paris, something like that. It's really light. It's really light.
Okay, okay.
It would be something like what's the expression? Guilty pleasure. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's not something that I would say like you really need to read that because it's really easy reading. Otherwise, the thing that I kind of liked, but it was fantasy reading, it's A Discovery of Witches, which was also a series. Yeah, but I preferred the books, and it's also written by a historian. Yeah,
Right,
so I like the references from history
right.
in those books. Yeah.
And finally, if your life were a movie, what would be the theme song on the soundtrack?
Um, wow, so many as well.
But you can only
Um,
pick one.
Oh my God. I never can pick just one. Whatever you ask me, I always say, I'm an anthropologist. I have a degree in undefinedness. There's always another view to the topic.
Right.
Um, in general, I really like film music. So to me, it would be a list of film music from Spotify. Definitely tracks like um, Shakespeare in Love has really nice music. And it's light, but it's so full of things that surprise you. Let's say I really like if there are elements of surprise in music. That's why I used to really like Björk.
Hmm.
Lately, she's very dark, I would say, and eccentric. But at the beginning, her music was so fascinating to me because there were so many surprising elements, even in the background.
Hmm.
And that's what I like, that it's not just flat, but
Right,
you always have something to discover in
right,
there. And you're like,
right,
oh my God, I did not expect that. So lovely. Who thought of that?
right, right, right.
Yeah, so that was probably my soundtrack. There's always something to discover. But
Okay.
otherwise, music is always it. Even today, for instance, I think I changed 3 or 4 playlists according to my current level of energy and the things that I needed to do. Like in the morning, if I'm meditating, I listen to a different music than when I need to concentrate on something that I'm working, or if I'm really down with energy, or it's I don't have just one preferences. It it really depends.
I'm the
Yeah.
same way. I listen to everything, and
Yeah.
my playlists are curated to my mood.
Yes. That's why it's so hard for me to choose just one. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
It
I
depends on
know.
the moment. Even when they ask me, so what's your favorite food? Depends on day and
Right,
time of day and certain other elements as well.
right. Well, in a
Yeah.
way, when we ask people to choose favorites, it's very limiting, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. It's like, oh, but now if I say this one, then I completely ignore the other one that is also quite important to me.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
Answers loosely defined. Good enough.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Sarah, thank you for being my first recording for the season. I'm excited to get started. This was a great way for me to get started. As I said, I will be in touch to let you know when your episode will drop. But until then, enjoy the rest of what time is it there?
You mean at the moment or in period of
At the
so
moment,
at the moment, yeah, because we're talking about
like
periods.
the clock time.
Clock time, it's It's 20 till 7 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah,
So enjoy
so
the rest of your evening as I head
yeah,
into my afternoon.
yeah, enjoy your afternoon and the whole season.
And as I always say, may the peace and the love of the goddess be with you today and always.
Thank you, and the same to you. And thank you very much for having me and being such a lovely company to make this conversation. It
Oh,
was lovely.
thank you very much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks for watching or listening to The Girlfriend God. Don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, follow, and comment. Episodes drop every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you can follow The Girlfriend God on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.